Well, how about that? That was a little bit of a glitch in the system, a glitch in the matrix. No, it's not. Hello, Josh. Welcome to J&J News. We have a lot to talk about today. Good to see you.
It's great to be back on the show with you. Happy New Year to you and everybody in America, Australia, and around the world. Let's get cooking. We got a lot to talk about.
We certainly do. Well, you might have noticed, Josh, at the bottom of the screen there is a number that's scrolling through 3877. That is how many days I have been on this crusade for a changing world for the better. And what that date correlates to is May 30, 2015, the day Bernie Sanders announced that he was running for president, and where me, a former lefty, realised that it was about an anti-establishment character sticking it to the man and making an announcement. Who would have thought that 11 years on that we would be looking at a very different set of circumstances, and the other anti-establishment character being the one that is shaking up the planet. And today's show, what I want to do alongside your great work is to point out to the viewers exactly why Trump is not one of them, despite the black-pilling cancer that we're all enduring, because there is just so much going on.
Okay, well, that sounds amazing. Congratulations on 11 years. That would make me probably more than that, because I think I'm approaching my 13th year right now. So I haven't done the math as you did, but I would assume it's over 4,000, right? That's probably accurate.
The significance, right, is that if you think of 11 years, I mean, high school's 6 years, so it's almost two going through high school
4
periods.
Years in America for me, but
okay, well there you go.
You're really bad and you step back, you stay back.
We do 6. A university degree is typically 3 or 4. If you do a medical degree, it's 6. If you do a PhD full time, it's 3 years. So if you took 6 years of high school, 3 years of an undergraduate degree, and 3 years of a PhD. For example, they might say you need to do something in the middle, but the reality is it's a bloody long time, and it's a long time to be watching what's going on and still having to kind of argue and debate with those out there that are sticking to their own narratives. Of course, one of the narratives that you just can't get people to sort of cross sides on are the zealots in the vaccine world. They will tell you to the end of the earth that there is nothing better than a vaccine, can't be scrutinised. And then you've got the others who are medical professionals who have determined that there are faults in that system. I saw a video clip yesterday explaining that when they moved the DTaP, so that's diphtheria, tetanus and pertussis, I think, that multiple vaccine, when they raised the age of taking it, SIDS went away. Isn't that interesting?
That is
right?
Interesting.
Because
RFK Jr. just recently said that he is redoing the entire food pyramid, if you will.
Yes.
And we're putting healthier food and things like that at the very top, and we're pushing all the bad stuff on the bottom. And, that's wonderful because it's going to make everyone more healthier. It's going to make our children have better concentration in school and able to learn better and things like that. And quite frankly, hopefully, our doctor bills and visits to the hospital and things like that will lessen as well. So kudos to RFK Jr. for keeping another promise. Again, promises made, promises kept here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw a video clip someone shared the other day, and there's a couple of interesting videos going around. This one was sort of analysing Australian pasta sold in supermarkets and what was actually inside them. So they do a bunch of tests, and the main thing is it's the hidden ingredients that you don't hear, such as Roundup glyphosate, that's getting into the food there, and they're saying, well, obviously that's poisonous, and yet we're not told what that really is all about. So it did a great big analysis of about 10 brands, and then concluded that there were a couple that were available that were healthy. I did a bit of research and found out that it's quite expensive, but of course that's the price that you pay. But of course this is the problem, isn't it? That it comes down to economics when you can pay pasta for 69 cents a packet, or you have to pay $12 for a packet. I mean, what do people do in those circumstances? But I guess what it does do is it teaches you that there is an advantage to start making your own food, if of course you have the time to be able to do that and kind of bridge that gap. So it creates a need, and therefore humans will always adapt, and you just become better at what you're doing. And we all learnt through the COVID era that there were a whole bunch of hobbies and skills that we learnt in that process when we had the time and space to do it. So yep, it's disturbing that I can't buy 69-cent pasta anymore, and silly me for doing it in the first place, but it's a learning curve, and that's what RFK Jr. has done there with his upside down pyramid.
And I'm going to upset a lot A lot of youngsters out there. You know the Harbo's brand of gummy bears?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they contain an element in it, a cancerous element known as titanium oxide. Now, do you have any idea what are the main metals used to make windmills is?
Oh, it wouldn't be titanium, would it?
Titanium oxide. So you are literally eating, when you have gummy bears, you're literally eating what is in the same material as windmills. Okay? Now, this is something I covered many, many years ago. But remember, the globalists want you to eat crickets. They want you to eat bugs and grasshoppers. And they want you to have bioengineered food. So my wife and I, for the last, probably 4 or 5 years at least, we do no bioengineered foods. We do no seed oils, cottonseed, soybean. All of those are terrible. The only ones you want to use are olive oil, avocado, and coconut oil. If you don't have those, you don't want to use anything else. If you are going to have fast food, which I don't recommend, make sure that they cook in beef tallow. And so these are some of the things that I've learned. And yes, it's a lot harder to go to the grocery store and get, really good ingredients, as 75-80% of the stores out there in America, certainly, I would say the food is so toxic you can't even eat it. Now, in Europe and other places, the food is much better, believe it or not. I don't know how it is in Australia, but in America, we have all this bioengineered garbage. And what does bioengineered mean? It means that it's bioengineered, meaning that whatever that food is, there is something engineered in that food that is not part of that food. Why would we be eating this stuff? I'm glad that RFK Jr. is on top of it.
Well, it certainly provides you a little bit of confidence that someone there is actually concerned. And at the same time, the zealots out there, those with titles in their names, are trying to tell you that he's the crazy one. But of course, it's all education for all of us, and you get to make your own decisions in a world that's, it's still free as far as we're aware. Now, what's not free is the people living under the rule in Iran of the Ayatollah. But that's all changing, Josh, at a great pace. I'm going to play a short clip here, and we'll come back and we'll discuss. It's just one example of the many clips that we're seeing of the people in the streets, and we've now learnt today that President Trump will be meeting with, you ready for this? This is the son of the Shah. There he is. Pahlavi meets Trump, 2 leaders, 1 movement at Mar-a-Lago. There is feeling now that we're going to see some regime change in Iran. We've also learned that the phone lines have been cut, the internet is down, so this seems to be the very, very last bit. Is the Ayatollah, Josh, heading for Moscow? And if he is, what is it with Moscow and harbouring dictators?
Well, they have a history of doing that, obviously. Bashar al-Assad went to Russia. Others have went to Russia as well. But here's what I want to talk about this. We saw what happened when Israel and Mossad and the IDF, along with the United States military, took out the nuclear facilities in Iran. And there was a lot of talk then about regime change, and there was a lot of talk about Pahlavi coming in and actually being the new leader in Iran. And of course, that didn't materialize. They left him in power. But with the people finally fed up, when you get to a certain point when you have nothing to lose, that's when the people will rebel. And that's when the government should fear those people, because that's when those people are most dangerous to a regime in power. And that is what is unfolding right before our very eyes. I do hope that President Trump reaches out and maybe perhaps arms some of the dissidents that are going to actually go and take care of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the mullahs, the clerics, and everything else. But I was talking about this just the other day on my show. We are literally one extraction away from changing the entire world. Venezuela was the #1 crude oil reserve country in the entire world, 303 billion gallons, okay? Number 2 is Saudi Arabia, and who's number 3? Iran. Who is most dependent on Iranian oil? What country in particular? It is China. 89% of their oil comes from Iran. The rest came from Venezuela. So if you want to knock out the threat to the number one world superpower, which is us and must always remain us, this is how you do it. You extract and you remove the Ayatollah from Iran. And here's what happens. Number one, as in Venezuela, you will be liberating millions upon millions of people that have had to live in fear and death and hangings and public executions and stonings and all this horrific things that they've had to live with for all these years since 1979. That would be one thing. You would be liberating those people first and foremost. The second thing, you would be eliminating the largest state sponsor of terrorism throughout the entire world in one shot. And number three, if you took the oil and eventually gave it back to the people, you'd make Iran great again. You'd make Iran wealthy again, just like we're going to do with Venezuela. We're going to make Venezuela great again and make it wealthier again. But more importantly, we would then reorganize the entire world order by removing the Ayatollah. Because if we take their oil, you have 303 billion, which is the number one most crude oil in the world, was Venezuela. We were like number 10th at 48 billion. And then, of course, number 2 was Saudi Arabia, but number 3 was Iran. Number 4, I think, is Kuwait. So number 3 and number 1 would be under American control. This would force these despots, dictators, and regimes around the world to buy oil from the United States. We would be far and away the number 1 crude oil reserve country in the entire world. And if they want to survive, if they want oil, they're going to have to buy it from us. And that way we have political leverage and we can get rid of some of these really nasty regimes. So I say, President Trump, one more major extraction, take out the Ayatollah, put him and arrest him, and now let those people be free.
What if the Ayatollah takes off himself and leaves the Shah to come in, which appears to be the way? You achieve the same result?
I think it would. Yeah, I think it would, because, again, you have to get rid of the head of the snake. Mm-hmm. And whether he slithers away to Russia or whether he's captured or whatever, or maybe the people will take care of themselves, I don't know. But remember, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards were very, very destroyed and depleted during the 12-day war between Israel and Iran with the help of the United States. And so you have a very depleted Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The time is now. The time is ripe now for the people in Iran that have nothing to lose whatsoever other than to gain their freedom to do exactly what they're doing. And we as Americans and our government, this administration, needs to back them up. They need to arm the dissidents, whatever we can do to make sure that this regime falls.
Did you know that 75% of all global executions occur in Iran?
Wow.
How's that
I'm
for
not
a staggering?
surprised.
Yeah, staggering stat. I interviewed a fellow from the Iran Resistance Council that is based in exile in Paris, and I asked him, I said, how do you come up with such a figure and who's being executed? And he said there are teenage girls being executed for resisting the regime. As an example, he says it's just what it is. So you can see now why there are people finally on the streets when they have the courage to do so. And courage is a big thing. And the hardest thing about being courageous is to consider that everything is bad and this whole black pilling cancer that's going on and sitting there and tapping away on a keyboard. And then, of course, when one black pillar gets out, you get a bunch of keyboard warriors behind it who aren't particularly tough, who are just agreeing with what's going on. So now in Australia we have an interesting scenario where our Prime Minister has, he's telling you he hasn't backed down, he's telling you that he's considered, but he's called a Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and social cohesion in Australia based on the tragic events of what happened at Bondi on the first day of Hanukkah. And of course he's coming out strong on the front foot saying he's consulted with the right people, but of course there's a glaring big black hole that the Jewish people aren't particularly pleased with this choice of Royal Commissioner, in retired High Court Justice Virginia Bell. And the reason for that is that she was appointed firstly as the High Court Justice by Kevin Rudd, former left Labor Prime Minister, and she also held a TV show on the ABC. But she's not particularly, they're arguing that she's got the same interests as the Jewish people here in Australia. And of course, they pointed out there were some other better choices. However, you would have to expect that from the Prime Minister, that at the end of the day, he's still got to protect his own interests, and that's the reason why he held that off. But just to make a quick comparison here with what you just explained about making the Venezuelan people wealthy, just as you will make the Iranian people wealthy based on their oil reserves alone. Here in Australia, we have an incredible amount of natural resources, starting with iron ore, for example, the best in the world. China buys most of it, and we can attract a premium for that. We also have abundant oil reserves, abundant gas reserves, abundant uranium reserves. We also are able to create untold amounts of wheat and other crops, etc. And we make the best beef in the world. Americans will probably argue with that, but Australian beef is wanted by everyone. And we haven't even talked about lamb as we head into Australia Day on January 26, where our ambassador, Sam Kekovich, is out there with his yearly incredible the lamb ads that they do to promote that on telly as well. My point is, there was a meme that popped up this week, and there was a picture of Trump dressed as the Grim Reaper wiping out regimes, and someone said, why can't he come to Australia? Well, Australia, we probably don't need Trump to come in there and to wipe out just the same. Albanese's doing a very good job of taking himself out. What we do need in Australia is the recognition that we do have these abundant, beautiful natural resources that will make us all wealthy. And the only person that actually brought that up in 2022 was the much disliked Clive Palmer, for whom I ran for the UAP in office, and I liked what he was trying to say, the same thing, and he talked about different ways to build that up, and he worked with Craig Kelly, the former Liberal MP who became the leader of the UAP at that stage, to be able to show us how you could use your iron ore resources to firstly pay off our debts over 20 years, but therefore use all these other great resources as well. The point being, Josh, and this is where I'm going with all of this, is that Trump said that he was putting Larry Fink and BlackRock in charge of rebuilding Ukraine. So immediately the black pillars came out and said, see, Trump's one of them. Well, what people didn't see, or what they didn't want to see, was that yesterday Trump came out and said that BlackRock, Vanguard, and a number of those other companies are not allowed to buy residential homes anymore, which automatically takes the pressure off prices. And BlackRock's market capitalisation fell by $17 billion. Do you do that to your friends, Josh, or do you do that by keeping your friends close and your enemies closer?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's actually something that I'm hoping that we're going to discuss a little bit here later on Full Throttle Thursday. But what I will say is this. These investors have come in and they have purchased numerous homes, millions upon millions of homes in the United States. And of course, they targeted certain areas and things like that. And basically what they did is they took the inventory. And when you take the inventory away, then you have young people that want to buy homes and they want to start their lives, you know, maybe newly married, maybe single, whatever that might be. And they want to be able to be homeowners instead of renting. And what happened was there was a shortage of homes because of these investors. And then landlords were allowed to take advantage of that and skyrocket these rates and the rents and things like that. So it's an interesting thing. BlackRock and, of course, Vanguard and State Street Capital, those three companies in particular, they run somewhere around 80 to 85% of all companies in the world. And they are a global monstrosity. Not a fan of really any three of those. I would love to see them all broken up at some point because, again, you know, there's competition reasons for that as well. But also, it's a conglomerate. I mean, you're literally taking trillions upon trillions of dollars away from other businesses that can't compete now because you have bought all of this stuff. Now, again, I understand capitalism, huge fan of capitalism, no doubt about it. But there is a difference between regular market share capitalism as opposed to crony capitalism, which almost has a globalist kind of tint to it, right? And so these companies are globalist companies.
Yep.
And so I think that if they're rebuilding Ukraine, as long as we're not paying for that directly, if they want to do it, or if somehow, Trump is, delegating them to do it with their money, that's fine. Do what you have to do. But I don't want our money here in America. I don't want our taxpayer-funded dollars building a country that is literally, the most corrupt country in Western Europe.
Well, the way I see that, if you are going to thin out their power here in the on American soil, but send Larry Fink over, and with the the bottomless pit, big eyeballs of seeing we're going to redevelop an entire country, you are sending to Ukraine known for its corruption, and at the same time, those that have made so much profits from that will be the same people that will be well known to Fink himself and the people that he was going to meetings with in Davos. So therefore, what you've actually got to do is you've got to take you've got to take the covered up dirty money, and then you've got to legitimize it by putting it out there in the real world, and then you've got the same people now having to come from darkness to light. And I kind of think that there's going to be some retreating going on, and there's going to be some real transparency. So it might not necessarily be the gift that those are thinking that Trump is. And don't think that if we don't know, well, Trump doesn't know. Josh, I want to pause. There's a 3-minute clip I want to play. This is a disturbing clip. It can be considered conspiratorial, but at the same time points to some very glaring facts related to the assassination attempt against Donald Trump in July in Pennsylvania in 2024. But let's have a look at this and then tie it into what we've talked about. We'll come back.
Austin Private Wealth shorted 12 million shares of Donald Trump's stock on July 12th. So here's everything that you need to know about Austin Private Wealth. Because if it's not an input error, it's definitely not intentional, right? As you can see, an event starkly reminiscent of strange trading activity just before the what attacks in 2001? On July 12th, do keep in mind, a day before July 13th, 12 million. Ironically, Austin Private Wealth's highest shareholders just so happen to be BlackRock and Vanguard. So what is a put option, people might ask? Well, like it says here, I pulled this good article that explains it very thoroughly. Ironically, a put option is an investment made by someone who expects a company's stock price to fall. I have no idea why they worded it wrong right there, but this still explains it pretty clearly. People who engage in inside trading by put options can make 5 times or sometimes even 100 times profits, depending on how quickly the stock plummets. And like it says here, hypothetically, if Trump did die in the assassination attempt, his company would have become worthless. Its stock would have become zero in a day. And hypothetically, the people who bought put options would have made billions in profit. The action that was taken was a shorted 12 million shares of Donald Trump's stock. Now this is the most important part, right? The potential impact that they listed was a significant loss supposedly for the company. What? And as you can see, this portfolio impact was nearly a quarter of their entire portfolio. And their portfolio value was about $1 billion in assets under management. And as you can see, in case of events like Trump's death, the value of Trump Media and Technology Group shares would have plummeted, and the put options held by companies such as the Austin Private Wealth would have been worth billions. Also, supposedly according to reports, ironically, Austin Private Wealth has also bought 36 million puts of Rumble on July 12th the same day. And supposedly, like it says right here, it's common knowledge that Rumble stock would have plummeted too if something had happened to Trump. Do keep in mind, these are all different articles, okay? Now this is the most interesting part of it all, right? Some of Austin Private Wealth's top holdings, as reported in their latest 13F filing, include the Rothschild family, BlackRock, Vanguard, Meta, George Bush, and the Cheney family. What? And like it says here, Trump's death would have crashed the NASDAQ and DOW Jones for a week. And hypothetically, supposedly according to some estimates, anyone who had this knowledge beforehand would have made an estimated $696 billion to $1 trillion in profits. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that just a month ago, BlackRock and Citadel Securities started backing a TXSE group to launch the Texas Stock Exchange. And as you can see earlier this year, specifically in March, BlackRock created a fund with Securitize, supposedly a big player in real-world asset tokenization. And of course, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, aka my fucking grandfather, said in an interview earlier that the company's filings for spot Bitcoin and other ETFs were stepping stones towards tokenization. And have you noticed what Ken Griffin's latest investments have been, aka the CEO of Citadel Securities? Because when you do, things start to get really interesting. And ironically, this just so happened to happen in 2020. I'm sure you can read that for yourself, right? And why might that be so important? Well, because one of Ken Griffin's major investments just so happened to be in Amazon. And wow, you can easily find things just like this. This was in 2022, right? Amazon leaks Greek what project? Everything starts to make sense eventually.
Powerful analysis when you look at it all. But if we can find that, and if that fellow can find that out, it's pretty obvious that Trump has also found out. And one wonders, therefore, why we were so slow on investigating the attempted assassination. But one thing it also does is that it pulls back those that say that it was an inside job and Trump faked the bullet, if in fact that his enemies would therefore be profiting off his death. I don't think you can be a friend and profit off your friend's death if that were the case. And one other thing to mention there, Jeff Bezos, Larry Fink, these are the characters that have suddenly become kind of friendly with Trump. And at the same time, Trump has also announced that in Davos, in a couple of weeks' time, that's when he's going to talk about the banning of these big companies buying residential homes. So isn't that shoving it right in the face of Larry Fink?
Well, look, I think this is a situation where my enemy of my enemy is my best friend type of situation. I would not trust Larry Fink. I would not trust Bezos. I would not trust Zuckerberg. I would not trust any of these people. These people were at the throat of President Trump before he became president, let's face it. Let's also understand that the quote-unquote shooter, right, of President Trump, Thomas Matthew Crooks, was in a BlackRock commercial.
Correct.
So where is that? Why is that coincidence? That can't just be a coincidence. How was he recruited to do that? Like I said before, and I'll say again, I'll say until I'm blue in the face, there is no way that kid acted alone. No way. He was a patsy, and once he missed, thank God he missed because of Trump turning his head, they had no choice but to silence him right away, and they killed him, and they said, oh, look, it was one shooter, and that was the end of that. But the bottom line is, who was behind him? Who was financing him? Who brought in the ladder and left it? Who was the guy in the van that came by? Who was the other person that they said might have been on the other side, possibly having two shooters? Why hasn't the Aaron Zippoloni character come to fruition that I've talked about ad nauseum? This is the person who shot Crooks before he was shot by the Secret Service sniper. He was shot from the ground with a smaller caliber weapon, which startled him, knocked him down, knocked his gun back. He went to pick up his gun, and before he could shoot again, boom, he was gone. So Aaron Zippoloni is someone that people should be looking into. What about the chief of police in Butler, Pennsylvania? What about the forensics? What about the fact that the family immediately called in a cleaning service and cleaned out their house, got rid of their garbage and lawyered up? There's a lot more here. This is not a, quote, closed case of a patsy one shooter. This was a criminal conspiracy. I don't know if we're ever going to get to the bottom of it. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. President Trump on day one, January 20th, day one, as soon as he's sworn in, hand on the Bible, sworn in, yeah, I'm president of the United States. Okay, get my team together. I want to know by midnight tonight who tried to kill me. I don't understand. Where is the sense of urgency from the president of the United States? I would want to know. You would want to know. Anyone would want to know. That would have been the number one priority before anything else. Who tried to kill me on July 13th? So
this is why people, I guess, are suspicious. But if you're fighting one of the great wars of all time, and it's a war, globalists versus the nationalists, etc., and restoring America as the superpower, when those that are meant to be representing America are actually anti that and moving and folding into globalism under this Islamification of planet Earth, it just doesn't seem to make any sense. Josh, just popping up right now from the Department of Labor, check this out. Trust the plan, trust Trump. When do you ever get that on an official page? It's kind of, it's a big thing, right?
Well, it is. And look, we have to understand that the economy is purposely being kept from exploding because of Jerome Powell. Okay, the Federal Reserve Chairman sadly has a ton of power, and he can't be fired. And if you do fire him, the courts are going to put him right back in, and he knows that. So you have to, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We should have done this. I suggested this back in April. Okay, in April of last year, I suggested as soon as he started not doing anything by moving the rates down, I said, why don't we just appoint a shadow Federal Reserve chairman. Now, he can't take office until Powell's term is up, but that doesn't matter, because anything Powell would have said, he would have then went on CNBC, Squawk Box, all the different financial shows, and he would have combated everything that Powell said. In other words, you would have had a shadow Federal Reserve Chairman that would have made the actual Federal Reserve Chairman and his job so uncomfortable that he would have stepped down. And I don't know why they didn't do it. It was a suggestion that I had a long time ago. And I think he would have, if you would have put a lot of pressure on him like that, not to mention they could be indicting him for the building in Washington, D.C. that apparently is under suspicion, and some of the things. He lied about the payments. He tried to hide how much the costs were. So there's some things there as well. But Powell is really the problem. But with 18 trillion, and now with the oil and everything else coming in from Venezuela, you're looking at close to probably 19.5 to 20 trillion dollars. The most that it's ever been done in a presidential term was $3 trillion, and he's close to probably 20 trillion. So the golden age is going to start, but we've got to get rid of the Federal Reserve Chairman first.
Well, absolutely. But if you can make people in your own country wealthy, just as the oil plan for Venezuela is set to do that, that's what it's about. And the same that goes with Iran, that you make these countries that were once meant to be your enemies, the people in them, wealthy. Therefore, you're showing them that the people that represented them were no good in the first place. Here's Trump just now posting this breaking news. Numbers released today show that the US has the lowest trade deficit since 2009 and going lower. In addition, our national gross domestic product, or GDP, is predicted to come in at over 5%, and that is after losing at least 1.5% to the Democrat shutdown. These incredible numbers and the unprecedented success of our country are a direct result of tariffs, which have rescued our economic and national security. I hope the Supreme Court is aware of these historic country-saving achievements prior to the issuance of the most important decision ever, and that's coming up very, very soon. So there it is. Tomorrow. There you go. So coming up tomorrow. So hopefully this will
possibly tomorrow. We all better pray. Everyone in the United States, Australia, everyone, anyone that loves freedom and wants prosperity for themselves and their country needs to pray that the Supreme Court does the right decision and allows these tariffs. Because what these tariffs do is essentially they use political leverage. And a lot of these regimes that are dangerous regimes, communist regimes around the world, they're being reined in based on the tariffs. Also, we were able to stop 8 wars. Now, obviously, great negotiating skills from the President of the United States, but what else helped and was a major factor? Leverage. What was that leverage? Tariffs. The Supreme Court, please get this right.
Well, every country has been able to sort of take a piece of the US with its own tariffing structure, and that's why Trump applied it the other way. It was always a given that somehow the Americans, because they were the largest economy in the world, was meant to give something to everyone else to help them out. This is a rebalancing, and of course what happens therefore is you see what's happening is you lower that trade deficit therefore, and you start growing the economy. So Trump is about economy first, wealth first, and then security that brings, and therefore you can get to justice. And you don't get to have a Nuremberg until after the war is over, and this is a war being fought over economics. Now we're going to move into a bit on corruption. This is a quick story I want to bring up. I don't get on to too much, but federal prosecutors have just blown the lid off a $7 million snap fraud scheme in Boston. 2 Haitian nationals have been charged for running so-called ghost stores, tiny shops with barely any inventory that was somehow cashing $540,000 a month in EBT. That's 6 times the snap volume of a real fully stocked supermarket. So in other words, a fully stocked supermarket's going to cash in about $90,000 a month in snap, what do you call them, little benefits or whatever they are, vouchers. The stores are allegedly using to trade the EBT for cash and illegal items, draining taxpayer funds at an insane scale. Not a corner store hustle, industrial level fraud. And that is the point. Speaking of that, before we go on, I'm going to play this little clip now. This is about Michael Bird. And Josh, just explain briefly who Michael Bird is, and then we'll cut to the clip.
Yeah, Michael Leroy Bird. This is the unindicted murderer, let's call him what he is, of Ashley Babbitt, the 14-year veteran whose only crime was going into the Capitol. And she was unarmed, and she was executed, shot in the neck, in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, and quite frankly, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of people that have seen the video. She didn't deserve that. This is someone that has had a history of not being trained to use a firearm, has failed numerous attempts, and also did not keep up with the certification requirements for his job. This is someone that left a loaded handgun in the men's bathroom, in the Capitol bathroom at one point as well. And now, well, this is what he's up to now. Go ahead and...
This is another one of those stories where I was like, what? So y'all remember Michael Byrd from January 6th? This is the Capitol Hill police officer who decided to murder an unarmed Ashley Babbitt. Well, guess what kind of business he runs out of his home? Guess he's got some Somali friends who turned him on to a good venture. Yeah, apparently, Robert Byrd has been running a daycare out of his house for the last 17 years. Now, just to add a little more intrigue, somehow, in 17 years, the Byrd's family daycare in Brandywine has 0 reviews. Not a single parent has said they sent their kids there. But that hasn't stopped Mr. Byrd from raking in millions. Yes, the Capitol Hill police officer, who, by the way, isn't certified to take care of kids. Oh, and neither is his wife or anyone who lives at the home. Yeah, they've been running a daycare out of their house, a daycare, for the last 17 years and have taken in millions of dollars of taxpayer money over that time. And we're all supposed to pretend that's normal.
It's 190 million, if you want to know the exact number that they have taken in. Unaccredited daycare. Who knows? Maybe there's no kids there as well. Look, this is someone that should never have gotten a pardon at the last minute by the auto pen. We need to go through this auto pen investigation, indict these people. We need to go to the Supreme Court, and we need to take any one of these and just say, hey, I need you to look at this, preemptive pardoning and make a ruling on whether or not this is constitutional. I do not believe it is constitutional at all. And so I think that at some point, if you can challenge that to the Supreme Court and they do the right thing, now all of a sudden, Fauci and all the rest of them that were quote-unquote auto pen pardoned, now all of a sudden won't be pardoned anymore. The key is the auto pen investigation.
$190 million brought in 17 years. $10 million a year to run a family daycare, for goodness sake. Family daycare here in Australia, you're restricted to 4 or 6 children at a particular home. You use part of your home to do it, the family room, the backyard, etc., and you collect maybe $100 a day from for each child, $600 less the costs, etc. If you're lucky, you can kind of make $100,000 a year income for a family to be able to run it, but that's not $10 million a year. It's not possible that you can do it. It's just unbelievable. But of course, what that sets you up for is that if you've got that much money going around, then it becomes a kickback scheme, and that's obvious what is going on here. And the only way that you can keep everyone quiet is that you grease everyone's palms in the process. Who would have thought that it would have been achieved under the radar in an area where nobody was pretty much looking, because they're all too busy going to work and trying to work out how to get their children looked after so that they can go to work and keep it going. And then you wonder, like sloppy people like Michael Byrd with that big house there, you're wondering how it is that somebody on a police income can have such a property like that. They'll argue that it's a legitimate business on the side, but it just shows you that they aren't good money managers. They pretend that they are and they all become wealthy, but there's stupid people that get involved with absolute corruption. And of course, when it all comes push to shove, these are the people that are making all this money, have got more money than they need, so they just keep spending and doing what they like and look like they know what they're doing. Haven't even talked about Nancy Pelosi and share trading. We've talked about that in the past. We don't need to talk about that today, but it just shows you that we are getting very, very close now as we're getting into this whole corruption scandal that's going on. A couple of quick clips and we'll come back and talk about the corruption that's going on in Minneapolis. Let's do the first one here, just showing you some
to enforcing federal law. You know, we've got thousands of officers there, and I'm not opposed to sending more if necessary to keep people safe. Back up here.
So we're talking about Minneapolis and the shooting, obviously, of Renee Gold, and then of course we're talking about the investigations into fraud, where the two separate images are coming from. Josh, an update.
Yeah, even before that, remember Michael Bird was only pardoned for the shooting. He was not pardoned for anything having to do with this daycare. So I hope that investigators are looking into him, and perhaps maybe he will face justice, at least from that point. As far as the shooting was concerned, look, this was a left-wing agitator that spent the entire day cursing at them, getting in their way, doing all these crazy things, and then got into the car, and when the ICE vehicle was stuck, got into her car, made a conscious decision, let's not forget this, made a conscious decision to get into her car and go in front of the ICE vehicle that was stuck. They asked numerous times, please move your vehicle. Please get out of the way. We're not going to ask you again. Please, please, please. And so eventually, they walked up to the vehicle, and you had one guy on one side, and here's a perfect image of it. You had one officer at the driver's side door, and you have an officer directly behind the front of the car. And the officer said, please get out of the car, and apparently there was no response. So then he yelled, probably cursed, get out of the car. Didn't do anything. So at that point, and if you look at the brake lights, you can see that the car was, the foot was on the brake, because you can see that it's lit up in the second image. Well, what happens after that? Not to mention the wheels are turned towards the officer that is talking, as well as the one that is directly in front of the car. As soon as the brake lights go off, you can see an immediate and quick acceleration directly into this officer who, by the way, back in June, was also a victim of another left-wing agitator doing the same thing, trying to run him over. So you know what? Maybe on the first time, he said, whoa, I wasn't aware of this. But believe me, by the second time, he said, this is not happening again. I'm whipping out my gun. And basically, when the car was coming at, boom, it was a direct shot right into the temple in the front of the forehead. And from there, the car veered into another car, and she died shortly after that. But this was, and I will make the verdict right now, a justified homicide.
Well, that has been supported by J.D. Vance, and at the same time, the wife of Renee Gold is blaming herself for sending her down there to that event as well. So it's escalating in different ways. And then, of course, we're going to get the Democrats. Here's an example of Rashida Tlaib. I shot and killed a woman in Minneapolis today while she was trying to drive away from them. Her killer must be held accountable and brought to justice. We need this rogue agency out of our neighbourhoods. Abolish ICE now. Josh, tell me this. When do you in the United States, or we here in Australia, when pulled over by an official authority with a gun, when do we ever get to drive away from them when they are asking us to do something else? Do you get to do that?
Let me see.
We don't.
Never.
Exactly. A police person pulls you over and you got to wait and you got to listen. You can challenge them, certainly, over the facts. But one thing you don't get to do is say, I've had enough and drive away. I just can't believe the excuses that we're putting up with. But at the same time, Rashida Tlaib will be coming out and saying something else against someone who doesn't agree with her. Well, they've got to be punished. Maybe if you're not wearing a mask, for goodness sake, in COVID, you've got to go down and be locked up. What if you're protesting the results of an election that weren't actually legitimate? And you've got concerns there. Do we go to January 6 all over again? You can see why people have just had enough here, and this is why it's so well divided. But Josh, look, so much going on, and we're running out of time, but I want to talk about Greenland. We can't let this one go. Here's a story. To defend Greenland, Danish politicians call for soldiers from Germany and France. Are these people really up on the facts of what's going on, or is there something else behind the scenes why President Trump knows he's getting Greenland anyway?
Well, let me explain to the international audience in Australia and around the world. There is literally nothing that NATO, Denmark, or Greenland can do if the United States wants to go into Greenland and build more military bases, secure the airspace over Greenland. There is nothing you can do about it. You know why? Because after and around World War II, the Nazis went into Greenland. And they were trying to occupy Greenland to attack the United States. Well, guess what happened? Denmark said to the United States, hey, we need your help here. Can you push these Nazis and the Germans out of Greenland? Sure, no problem. And guess what they did? They signed an agreement in 1951 that allows the United States to go into Greenland and build military bases and control the airspace. So this whole thing about buying Greenland, taking Greenland by force, it's all garbage. It's all unnecessary. We're going to be able to go into Greenland whether anyone likes it or not because we already have a law on the books. It was, by the way, updated in 2004 with Greenland and semi-autonomous immunity as well. So this means that whatever Greenland wants to do and whatever the Danes want to do and whatever NATO wants to do doesn't matter. It's what the United States is going to do. And we have to do this because we have to protect America, our hemisphere, from the Chinese and the CCP. They want to get set up in Greenland so that they can launch a nuclear attack possibly in the future against the United States. It's not going to happen. The United States is going to secure Greenland, which, by the way, will secure Denmark, and it will secure the United States and all the areas, Canada and everywhere else around there. We are not going to allow the Chinese to launch missiles into the United States from Greenland.
Some news from Rep Tim Burchett confirming that Minnesota taxpayer funds went to Somalia and terror organisation Al-Shabaab, but they ended up in Iran. So further developments there as we're going in today's show. So Greenland will be used for the benefit of the United States, obviously for the benefit of the people of Greenland. And the world. There's reports that Donald Trump is offering residents of Greenland to secede from Denmark between $10,000 and $100,000 per capita. There's an interesting development there. We'll see if that's been confirmed. That's another story that's popping up. Now, also, when you rein in what's happening with Venezuela and Iran, and you talked about the taking away of the power of China, and that means that they're going to have to retreat from Taiwan, Russia not being able to get the benefits of trading in sanctioned oil, therefore, as well, will have to retreat. Takes a bit of the wind out of the sails of Putin, who will then probably likely have to compromise a little bit in order to get this peace deal solved with Ukraine. So it also says that despite the fact that we think that this may have all been planned and we're watching a movie, there are moving pieces going along here. And whilst Trump talked about the idea of ending the war with Russia and Ukraine on day one, and all the Democrats saying, well, see, you didn't do it. Well, what did you guys do? Nothing, the square root of zero. So therefore, if there are moving parts, and now we bring Larry Fink in and offer him Ukraine, take away his residential staff, weaken Putin to a point that he's got to get a compromise, we actually arrive at a better deal. And we also arrive at a situation that people are scrambling, and those that shouldn't be will be found out, and those that should be will do the great work that's going on. Mike Flynn has just come out and praised J.D. Vance and saying, thank God we have this man being able to explain and give a lesson in the White House press room as to what's going on in the time of crisis, in this crucible moment, as he called it. Now, last question really before we go. Will Tim Walz be held to account? Will Tim Walz be put in handcuffs as the Minnesota fraud episode continues?
I believe he probably will. Yes, I do. I think this fraud scandal in Somalisota, as I'm calling it, is so huge, and it's going to wrap up not just Walz. I mean, why else would he not be running? Because he's probably very worried about whether or not he's going to have his freedom very soon. I think Jacob Frey is also going to be involved in this, and I am hoping and praying that Ilhan Omar, who is my number one nemesis for the past 5.5, 6 years, and has cost me a lot in my own career because of exposing her and who she is, and Keith Ellison, of course. And so I think it's not going to stop there. I think you're going to see a lot of Democratic politicians, possibly even some Republican politicians, but you're also going to see these people that are running these daycare centers, that are running these home health care centers, that are running these medical transport businesses, that are running these restaurants, that are running these supermarkets. I think they're all, I mean, you saw all the different boxes. They've got 2,000. They're probably going to bring in another 1,000 by the end of this month into Minnesota. So I think it's just beginning at this point. But yeah, we definitely need to wrap because I've got my next show coming up. But it's always a pleasure being on with you, and I hope the audience enjoys it as well.
Well, fabulous. And last comment from me, a lot of people complaining of the relationship between Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham and saying, what's he doing with him? Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. No one who's watching this show will forget who exactly was Lindsey Graham's best friend in John McCain and what type of funeral John McCain got. And of course, what did John McCain do with the Russian dossier? Mm-hmm. He was the one that delivered it to the FBI on behalf of Hillary Clinton. So again, don't think that Donald Trump doesn't know what's going on. And therefore, in this part of the world, putting this news together, focusing on the great big trust the plan that you just saw there from the Department of Labor, that's the focus of where we're going here. We are being as centred as we possibly can, pushing away the black pillars on one side who are determined to tell us that the whole world's turning to shit when it's not. It's going the other way. We are kicking goals at a rate of knots. And here in Australia, when we're able to put our stuff together and not have to necessarily lose our minds. There's talk of a protest occurring on Australia Day in New South Wales when there's not meant to be any protests, so please consider what you're going to do, and if you want to get yourself into trouble for something that doesn't need to be that way, things are moving in the right direction. Consolidation is where it's at, and I'm still working behind the scenes to bring you something very special in that regard, how we consolidate politically here in Australia. More to come on that, Josh. Thanks so much for your time today on J&J News. See you all next time. Thanks for watching.